So this is a different PowerPoint. A little bit longer than the other one, but don't worry about that. You'll be able to go through what you need to go through. Again, you will still get them through the rapid to get both two sets of slides. So again, remember my assignment was to cover 100 all the way to 300 AD. I kind of come a little bit short of 300 AD because I don't see any activity taking place exactly at 300 AD. Dr. Pasquarello is going to pick up from there, and I believe that it's going to begin talking about Constantine, because that's why you have the appendix when the persecution of the church, 313 AD, and then a lot of activity now needs to take place from that point onwards. But we are now getting into the second half of the second century, so we are getting to 150 AD onwards. And the interesting thing is, the more you look at church history, the more you realize that it goes back and forth, so that there will be things that take us all the way back to where we started, in order to be able to capture the thread of the development of whatever the issue is. So we are looking at the church in the second and the third century, from second century heresies to third century theology. That's where we are. Okay, I'm going to have to just do a broad overview as far as the relationship of the church and the empire is concerned. Again, I talked about the fact that Christians are being persecuted, but it is very interesting to realize that most of these persecutions during this time are actually sporadic persecutions. They kind of appear and then disappear in various parts of the empire, not necessarily directed by the officials. But as you get closer to the year 300, you begin to see situations whereby the officials begin to be involved. In fact, there are some edicts that are going to come from some of the emperors who are going to issue edicts towards persecution of Christians. I'm going to run that down very briefly, and then we'll continue from there. Ferguson makes the comment that in the book of Acts, we do get the background for later unfavorable treatment of Christians. The Jews sometimes would stir up trouble. Christian preaching often created wider discrepancies, and Christian teaching threatened a pagan society. And later on, I'll be talking about what the reasons for the persecution of Christians, because some of them were made up reasons. They did not resonate with the situation on the ground. And some of the apologists are going to be writing, telling the empire officials that, you know what, you have got this story wrong. So that when you hear people talk about the fellowship that we have as brothers and sisters, we are not practicing incest. And when you hear us talk about eating the body of our Lord Jesus Christ, we are not cannibals. This is what it is. So some of the apologists are going to write and be responding to those kinds of accusations. And Emperor Nero, you remember Nero as the one who murdered both Peter and Paul. Christians were blamed for all kinds of natural disasters. It kind of begins with the fire that destroyed the city of Rome in 64 AD, which was blamed on Christians. And I think there are some sources that indicate that Nero may himself have started the fire in order to blame it on Christians. Nero persecuted the Christians just because of the name. I mean, we are not given any other reason why Nero decided to persecute Christians. He persecuted them just because of the name of Jesus Christ. So Nero, read what Tacitus said here in his Annals of History, chapter 15, verse 44. I'm going to read part of it here. Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, for whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. And a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out, not only in Judea, the first source of the evil. You can hear Tacitus there just kind of really drinking with the hate of Christians here. But even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. It's going to list Christianity among those things that are hideous and shameful. So persecutions continued under Domitian. Now again, I need to state that there were no official edicts that required Christian persecution, but it was permitted and even encouraged by the emperors under Domitian. And you may remember Domitian is the one who exiled John to the island of Patmos, where he ends up writing the book of Revelation. Look at the years that are given there, 81 through 96 AD. Ferguson makes the comment that Domitian also had his relatives of Jesus in Palestine in for questioning as part of the search made for the descendants of David. Again, the concern was political. So I know that this is the time when John gets exiled. I move to Emperor Trajan, who was really a key figure when it comes to the question of the legality of the persecutions. And because many of the Christians were Roman citizens, and they had to go through a legal process in order to be able to take a person through these kinds of persecutions. And therefore, it becomes really a legal question. And there's a correspondence that is recorded between Emperor Trajan and Pliny the Younger, one of his administrators. And they are kind of really discussing how do we go about this thing? How do we go about dealing with Christians and make sure that we are on the safe side when it comes to issues of law, our Roman law? He was in emperorship between 897 to 117 AD, continued the policy of punishing Christians just for the name, followed the precedent found in dealing with the group known as the Druidism, who were being suppressed for political reasons. I don't know what they believe, but Christians were kind of equated with them and then punished just for the name. Goes on during the times of Hadrian, 117 to 138 AD, according to Ferguson, in response to popular tumults that forced Manchester to follow mob demands, he sought to kind of regularize the proceedings in law courts, in effect, reaffirming the policies of Trajan, whereby they kind of made sure that they don't take any accusation for the accusation's sake. There's got to be a question whereby then somebody is affirmed to be a Christian, and then he is asked to recant Christianity. And remember the martyrdom of Polycarp, that is what goes on, where he was being encouraged to recant Christianity. He was being asked to recant atheism, as Christianity was known by the Romans, because they worship other gods, not the Christian God. And so if you worship the Christian God, you are actually the atheist. And so it's very interesting that when he was asked to recant atheism, he looked at the arena and recanted the atheists who are there, who happen now to be the Romans. So that was very big. That's in this page. Anyway, at times of Marcus Aurelius, 161 to 180 AD, were particularly very bad for Christians. There's a wave of persecution between 166 and 68 AD. Now, this will be the years of the apologist stroke polemicist Irenaeus of Lyons. This is when he's doing writings during this time. It was during the Parthian War, a general edict now called for the sacrifice to the gods, which was not specifically under Christian intent. But of course, Christians are not going to sacrifice to the gods. And therefore, when they refused to sacrifice to the gods, then they were being persecuted for that reason. The result was, because now there's a law, there's an edict that is now issued against all kinds of people who are not sacrificing to the gods. The result was a wave of Christian response in the name of the apologists and polemicists of polemics, ones that occupy a majority of the Christian races of the last half of the century. So that's kind of the background we are dealing with here. Yes.
During all this time, which of course you're focusing on,
yeah.
How was the church doing? Was it evangelizing? Was it growing?
The church was growing very, very fast. It was evangelizing and growing very fast. You may recall in the midst of this, you may recall the words of Tertullian, who is going to say that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. So it was really spreading. And this is a general really practice whereby when the church is really persecuted, it grows. It may not grow in what you are seeing, but in terms of its underground, there are done all kinds of excavations and found all kinds of places where Christians hid and still continue to evangelize during this time. It really is spreading all over the empire. It is a threat to the empire. Let me put it like that. But there's a key question. Why were Christians persecuted? If we could give a formal answer to that question. Here's a book that caught my attention, and forgive me for this, I kind of read backwards and forwards. A book came out a few years ago in 2013 by Dr. Khadija Moss. You may Google her name and just find out kind of a scholar she is. I'm not calling attention to her. She's a professor of New Testament and early Christianity at Notre Dame University. The book, still have it on my table, the title is The Myth of Persecution, How Early Christians Invented a Story of Martyrdom. Now, some titles are kind of giveaways. you know what to expect. Like if you read Bart Ehrman's Misquoting Jesus, that's the title of the book, I'm headed the wrong way here. But anyway, she argues in her book that most of the concepts of persecution were actually invented by the 4th century Christian bishop Eusebius of Caesarea. So she kind of reads the history backwards, and she's reading history because, again, and Dr. Ramtin knows this, we have talked about it a number of times. The question is actually not these historical documents. The question has always been how you read this historical document. We call it historiography. And in fact, when we teach our church history here at the seminary, really the first class is on historiography because most of the problems are being from people who misread these documents. And so what she's doing is to project our 21st century liberalism all the way back to reading the documents that we have in earliest Christianity. And according to her, the story is independent. For the most part, and I quote her here briefly, the traditional history of a Christian martyrdom is mistaken. Christians were not constantly persecuted, hounded, or targeted by the Romans. There's just a snippet of truth in that, but it's very wrong. As you continue to read, you can see modern day liberal agenda just coming up here and there every now and then. So the book has been reviewed, of course. When you put your book out there, expect reviews, both good and also reviews that will call attention to problems in your book. And one of the reviewers made this interesting comment that most effectively, now Khadija Moss, pops the bumble of the illusion that hagiographic and historical works can be accepted uncritically. Now, by hagiographic literature, we are talking about now the stories of the martyrs. Remember that there has been a lot of literature telling us the stories of the lives of these martyrs. If it's written just to kind of give us a clean picture, it is known as hagiography. That is holy history. And we have those, and careful scholars can easily detect what has been exaggerated and what has not been exaggerated. So this review is calling attention to that. So this scholar is calling attention to that, and he says there's nothing new for a New Testament. That is nothing new for a New Testament scholar. However, she errs on the side of a critical dismissal of the wealth of historical sources on martyrdom by questioning their veracity because they lack knowledge of their exact relationship to historical events. So I can just stop there and read the rest of the quotation here. But what this reviewer is saying is that, you have read some of the information correctly, but you have read most of it wrongly. That's just what he's saying. The reviewer is saying that. So you will occasionally come across that kind of literature. There are more critical reviews of our work, but I'm just preparing you for information on why early Christians were persecuted. According to the apologists, now these are the ones who are responding to the accusations that are being labeled against Christians, whether by people outside the church or some people in the church who just want some clarification. Those become the polemicists. Christians were accused of atheism. They did not worship the Roman gods, and because of that, they were accorded the name atheism, that they are not worshiping our gods. And then number two, they were accused of cannibalism. And this really came from the language that we use when we are celebrating the Lord's Supper. They would say that we are eating the flesh of Christ and drinking his blood. And of course, that is internal language. We know what it means as Christians. Somebody who is outside of our faith can say that he heard people say they are eating somebody's flesh and they are drinking his blood. And then they ran with that. And then they were also accused of incest. And this came out of really some of the greetings that people would have in the church. I mean, if they greet something like greet one another with a holy kiss, and they hear Christians referring to one another as brothers and sisters, they would kind of move that a little bit further and accuse Christians of incest. So these were the three major accusations against Christians, which led to persecution of Christians. On atheism, Christians were accused of not performing customary ceremonies towards Rome. Cannibalism, of course, because of the language that they used, and then incest, because they called one another brother and sister. Sometimes they were accused of immorality, failure of Rome to distinguish between libertine Gnostics and Orthodox Christians. My comment here comes from Ferguson, and what he's saying here is that when people, yes, sir.
So when you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
You refer to the immorality of Christianity.
Right.
Can't we point to Corinthians and say there actually was that happening?
We can.
There was certainly immorality in the church.
That is true. However, the accusers are not inside the church, so they don't even know the case of Corinthians from an inside perspective. And it seems like the accusers were unable to differentiate between other groups that claimed to be Christians and actual Christians. The Gnostics, now remember, the Gnostics held this, and I'm making a general statement here because there are different groups in Gnostics. This general understanding that there is a huge dualism between the flesh and the soul. And they borrowed a lot of what we know as Platonic dualism, which puts a lot of difference between, distinction between the flesh and the soul. According to the Platonists, the saying was soma semen, which is another way of saying that the soul has been entombed in the prison of the body. And so for the Gnostics, the soul was good. It was looking forward to a time when it will be released from the body, be free from the body. But the flesh is dead and you can do anything. When it comes to salvation, it's only the soul that is saved. You can do anything with the body, including involving it in immorality, and there's no problem. For the outsiders, that was what was happening in the church. But this was for the
So the church kind of gave it some,
I know exactly what you're saying.
By the church's immorality, we gave this some food.
The problem the way it's coming across is that the outsiders did not know what was happening inside the church in Corinth. Now, Paul knew that and responded to that. When they were accusing the church of this, they were lumping it together with groups that were openly practicing immorality. And those would be the Gnostics. That's the point that I'm trying to kind of pass across.
Isn't there a huge difference between morality and spirituality? Morality is just correcting the old. Spirituality, you're a new man in Christ.
Right.
So it's a new creation. So it's not trying to better the old. It's a brand new.
It's a brand new. But the point is that the accusers were always looking for an opportunity to make an accusation. I'm not. Who are the Romans to be accusing Christians of immorality? It's like the cattle calling the for blood in that situation. So you have to also remember that. But they used this as a kind of a reason to persecute Christians. Yeah. Okay, let me just run through the rest of these very briefly. Look at this. Look at this. The people who poured scorn on Christians. Look at Celsus. Celsus is not just for pouring scorn on Christians. He was just he continually poured scorn on Christians. According to him, Christians were unprofitable members of society, miserable bunch of whippings, women, children, and slaves. Christians, moreover, called on people simply to believe and did not engage in rational demonstration. So these are the kinds of accusers that we are talking about here. Others say that Christianity is just too late. It's a late comer in the scene. Christ was actually a magician, and therefore they persecuted Christians. There were a number of responses that were offered by Christians. Look at the Origen. Remember my nickname for Origen is your dog. So he argued that God prepared the way for Christianity and fulfilled prophecy is kind of demonstrates its truth. So he's responding to the accusation that Christianity is new to the scene because Romans had a lot of emphasis on something being really antique. If something is not odd, then it's probably not true. What Origen is saying here is that that is not the case with Christianity. We have it not existing in the form of Christianity per se, but we have it prophesied in the Old Testament, and then it is fulfilled in the New Testament. So it meets the criterion for being antique, for being old, in the name of it being prophesied in the Old Testament. Further, the miracles that Jesus did were not done by magic, because Christians are being accused of following a magician, as is shown by the moral improvement of Jesus that Jesus brought to human life. Magicians are not known for bringing moral improvement. They were not known for doing that during that time. And therefore, Origen is able to appeal to that Jesus' miracles brought improvement in their lives. And then other critics focusing on lack of reason among Christians included the satirist Paul of Samosata, and Galen was actually a medical doctor. But Paul of Samosata is going to be very anti-Trinitarian. He taught what is known as patripassionism. You will come across that as you discuss the Trinity. Patripassionism is the belief that it is the Father who became incarnate and died on the cross. Father, passionism, suffering, is the one who suffered on the cross. That was Paul of Samosata's position, together with other groups of people. So Justin Martyr offered the most elaborate response, in my opinion. Now we call him an apologist. We are getting into the age of the apologist here, and Justin Martyr is going to offer this response. Kind of go back a little bit here on the process of determining whether somebody is going to be punished for being a Christian. Remember the conversation between Pliny the Younger and Emperor Trajan. Christians were not to be sort of, it's kind of like a formal process, how you kind of arrive at the accusation and then punish them. They were not to be sought out, and somebody will not go around asking people if they are Christians. They were not to be sought out, but if they are accused and convicted, they were to be punished. They were not supposed to be anonymous accusations. I think so and so is a Christian. Sneak a note into Emperor Trajan and say, I think so and so is a Christian. No, the accusations were to be made in the proper judicial manner. You come forward and you accuse people of being Christians, and then the deniers were now were to be pardoned. Punishment was henceforth on the basis of their name. So it's kind of a flashback to see how the trials went on. It did come out as clearly as I wanted it to come out, but that is the execution of Polycarp's manner when he was being murdered. So let's now move to the Christian apologists of the 2nd century. You kind of know some of the things that they are responding to, and some of them, of course, involve these accusations, but they'll also be responding to heresies, false teachings that will be emerging from the various sects during this time. So Christians responded to persecution through this genre of these kinds of writings, apologetics, and there's another class of writings known as the martyrdom writings. We call them the acta, acts of the martyrs, acta martyrdom, acts of the martyrs. And these were the forms of responses that Christians offered as they responded to these accusations, and again, as they responded to other kinds of false teachings. When we are talking about the apologists, Grant defines them this way. Apologists do not completely identify themselves with the broader society, but they are not advocates of confrontation or revolution. What I'm saying here is that when you come to the apologists, You come to people that do their work through persuasion, not coercion. They're not going to coerce people to come into their positions, and they are going to persuade people to come to their position. Rather, they address their contemporaries with persuasion, looking for links between the outside world and their own group, and thus modifying the development of both. Very interesting to read their work and see some of them at some points giving too much credence to paganism and to Greek philosophy, and in other places not giving anything to Greek philosophy. So it goes back and forth. It's very fascinating to read their works. And I may point out that most of these apologies were actually converted from Greek paganism. So they are coming out of that and then begin to respond to what they have known through their lives until they are converted. So you see that kind of activity taking place. The most significant ones are Aristides. I never say his name rightly, so I'm going to try. Justin Martyr. His name is Justin. He's called Martyr because he was martyred. Theophilus of Antioch, Tatian, and Athenagoras. Now, the case of Tatian is very interesting because he was a student of Justin Martyr. And then after Justin Martyr died, when Irenaeus began to write his book against heresies and versus hereses, he made a remark that Tatian became a heretic after the death of his teacher, Justin. And from that time onwards, the kind of the point starts. So when people are studying the apologists, they skip Tatian because they say he was a heretic. I don't think so, but that's a different question. Anyway, then there were the polemicists, those who kind of operated both inside and outside of the church, responding to questions inside the church and outside the church. And this would be, of course, the most significant one is Irenaeus of Lyons, writing the 5-volume book known as Against Heresies and versus Hereses, as it is known. Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian of Carthage, and then the epistle to Diomede mentioned there as part of these writings, and Manusius Felix. We are not going to go through all of them, but I offer a very summarized treatment. Oh, I quote myself. I treat them in a chapter in my book entitled Death in Second Century Christian Thought. It's a chapter that deals with all of them. So sorry for that. I'm going to keep going. Okay, let's begin with the earliest here. Aristides, the earliest apologist whose writings we still possess. He addressed a defense of Christianity to Emperor Hadrian, 117 to 138 AD. So it's kind of a little bit earlier than 150, but it's classified in the apologist. He probably wrote as early as 145 CE, he wrote the Apology, which makes the assertion that the world was meant for the church, since the church is the true Israel. Now you are going to begin to see what we today known as the kind of the church being having replaced Israel. The first time that was discussed, it was not discussed as a theological point. It was discussed as an apologetic point. It was so they are saying that really the church is not a new entry into the world. In fact, it is the true Israel. It's the Israel that has been promised. And to be clear, that's not my position, theologically speaking, but it's being used this time as an apologetic tool to argue for the fact that the church is not new in the sea. It fulfills the requirement for antiquity. Being there, prophesied, becomes now the true Israel. Aristides emphasized the ethical moral uprightness of Christians as opposed to that of the Egyptians and the Chaldeans. He attributed this moral uprightness to the expectation of the resurrection. He talks about that a lot in his writings. And I move to Athenagoras, making summary statements here. Although little is known, some books call him the Athenian philosopher. Some call Athenagoras the most eloquent of the early Christian apologists. We agree with that kind of assessment. Daily was written one of the most helpful books in early Christianity, and makes the comment that Athenagoras composed is what is known as plea for Christians. Now you can see the titles begin to argue for Christianity because these are apologists who are writing on behalf of Christians, defending Christianity. around the year 177. It's a praiseworthy document. The plea was actually an apology for Christians to these emperors who were also persecuting Christians, and Marcus Aurelius and Commodus during their tour of the Eastern Empire. It's a short summary here of his argument in the plea. Like Justin, Athenambrus stresses the moral importance for Christians of their hope in the resurrection and our future life, both because it entails the prospect of judgment and because they affirm so concretely the value of human existence. Only divine being is eternal in its nature. So it's going to kind of flesh that out. And you begin to see them not only defending themselves against the Romans who are persecuting them, but ideologically, you begin to see them interacting with aspects of Greek thought. So, for example, here is arguing against what is known as the immortality of the soul in Greek thought, whereby the soul is said to be eternal. We know it's not eternal. I still have some Christians today who think that the soul is eternal. It is not eternal because it has a beginning in the creative work of God. Now, from that point onwards, it lives forever. But before God creates, the soul is not there and it's not eternal. And so Athenambrus is going to argue against that Greek view of man. Tertian is going to still talk about that as well a little bit later here. Yes, Tertian. Born a pagan, converted during his journey to Rome, where he became a student of Justin. A very interesting story of his conversion. Then he writes these main works. He wrote what is known as Diatessaron, and students of New Testament know what this is because this is the first attempt to reconcile the synoptic gospels. Remember the first three gospels and how they agree for the most part, and then disagree in some areas, and you wonder who is talking from who. The first attempt to kind of put them side to side and compare them was done by Tertian. It's known as the Diatessaron, or the Seen Together. I love his oration against the Greeks. It's a short document, but it's well done. That's why he discusses some of the Greek concepts, like what we call metempsychosis, which is the concept of the transmigration of the souls, such that when somebody dies, his soul migrates to somebody else. And Tertian is going to say, no, that's not Christian. So it's a fascinating read. Later, he became an Ebronite. We came across this, and then that was, it was believed that he had become a heretic. I don't think he actually became a heretic, he just became a strict moralist in his life. So Irenaeus is the one who began that thing that he continues to learn. He kind of aligned Tertian with the Gnostics. The names here are of Gnostic teachers, but I don't think that's correct. Any question or comment? Okay, let's get to Theophilus of Antioch. He wrote what is known as the To Autolycus around 180 AD. And what is helpful with Theophilus is that he talks about what is known as logos spermaticos, which is the point that the Spirit of Christ has been existing forever. So he kind of traces what he calls the logos, the Spirit of Christ, and he traces it throughout the Greek thought. And his point is that when Greeks got something correctly, they did not just get it correctly out of nowhere. It was the Spirit of Christ working through them. So you see that along Theophilus, on the place of the death for a Christian. He says that on just a vessel, when on being fashioned there is some flaw, it is removed and remade, that it may become new and entire. So also it happens to man by death. So he thinks that is very helpful for Christians because it removes the vessel to make it new. As well, he produces a chronological argument for the antiquity of Jewish scriptures on which Christianity was based, and offers an allegorical reading of the book of Genesis. Now, move again to Justin Martyr, and we cannot exhaust them. You have them in the slide, and you go through the readings. He was born at Flavia, Neapolis, Greek-speaking, non-Jewish perhaps, was a Samaritan by birth. He was a Pythagorean and a Platonist before his conversion to Christianity. We are going to see some of that baggage playing into their argument that they begin to write as Christians. He reports in Dialogue 7, where he says he met with an old man who told him about Christ. You can read about that. But he is argued to be the most influential of these apologists. He fought like a four-fought battle. He fought against pagan intellectuals. He's been converted from them. He fought against the state, their understanding of Christianity. He is the first one to offer an apology actually against the Jews and their understanding of Christianity and Christ, and also he fought against the heretics. So you can, it's just so much material on such a matter. We'll just read just a section of that and skip the rest. Apology 1 is an address to the emperor, perhaps occasioned by the martyrdom of Polycarp, who was burned at stake. And he writes to say that he had been burned, he was standing for the right thing. Apology, he appeals to Emperor Hadrian arguing against condemning Christians just for the name, as we have come across a little bit earlier here, where they are being condemned just because of the name. So you can see that, or he responds to charges of incest. You see detailed responses clarifying, telling these people that, hey, you've got this thing wrong. When Christians use these terms, this is not what they mean. Cannibalism, etc., etc. One key argument that Justin makes is the antiquity of Christianity. Instead of being immoral, Christianity, he argues, is very, very moral. And he identifies demons with the pagan gods, etc., etc. You can read about him, but very, very, very helpful. I'm going to skip the summary there by Eric Osborne, this Australian scholar, who does a very good job of presenting to us. Justin, he has also written a book on Irenaeus, but kind of skip that summary. In his dialogue with Tryphon, the Jew, Justin seems to respond to two questions raised by the Jews, especially in chapter 10. Why do Christians not live different from Gentiles in Jewish religious customs and the scriptures enjoin covenant people to do? Second, why do Christians put their hope in a crucified man? He's going to offer a response to both of these questions. It's very simple. Christians are now the true people of God. But when you read the apologies, you'll be surprised, especially the epistle of Barnabas, where it is very clear that there are only three races of people in the world, according to these apologists. There's what they call the first race, which will be the Jews, because they held the Old Testament scriptures. And then there's the second race, which will be everybody else who's not a Jew. And then there's a third race, and the third race will be Christians, who are made out of people from Judaism and people from everyone else who is not a Jew. And according to these apologists, the correct race is the third race. So you read them and you see that kind of dialogue going on. Let's keep again the summary here. Again, you will have the slides, and I'm going to have to skip the summary here. And make some summary statement. Yes, sir.
So sorry, is he like one of the first people to advocate covenant theology?
We can read him like that. Himself and Barnabas. We can read them like that. But I would argue that that was not the intention. And the intention is different. They are arguing for the antiquity of Christianity, but their arguments kind of come across that. So, in fact, it's quoted in support of universalism that everybody will ultimately say, because he has comments that look like they are headed that direction. So, yeah. Okay. Any other question or comment? Okay, keep going here. So let me make a few summary statements on the apologies, and then we'll skip over here. Ferguson makes the comment that the apologies were not content with the defense. They also took offensive by attacking the pagan cults, so that they not just defend Christianity, they were able to offend against people who were opposed to Christianity, which were mythological, irrational, and often connected with immorality. These are the arguments that they bring to the table as they talk about these cults. As well, they expounded Christian faith, and that is what we call doctrinal development. They began to now concretize our understanding of the doctrines. Two approaches, according to Anderson, would be seen. There are those who burned bridges with the pagan world, that just cut across the pagan world, and then there are others who attempted to build bridges. And I think as Christians who kind of insist on building bridges as long as we don't sacrifice our faith, because our goal is to persuade people of the right understanding. I want to now move to the matters of the second century, kind of go through this again fast here. We have a ton of literature on martyrdom during this period of time. We have talked about why Christians were being persecuted, but I'm going to identify a few aspects of martyrdom here. There are all kinds of writings. We call them acta martyrium or acts of martyrdom. In fact, if you know George Fox's Book of Martyrs, it's kind of based on these writings which tell us about the lives of the martyrs. I note in my book elsewhere that although there's a great corpus of literature that has been identified as the hagiographical acts of martyrs, scholars have grouped them in two groups: the apocryphal acts of martyrs and the acta sanctorum, or the acts of martyrs. Let me attempt to translate that. There are exaggerated stories. Now that belongs to the first category, and when you read them, you can easily detect the exaggerations about the lives of these martyrs. But there are others that we think fairly represent what happened as far as these martyrs are concerned. So just know that. There are these writings in the first group. We have the Acts of John, the Acts of Paul, the Acts of Andrew, the Acts of Peter, the Acts of Thomas. By the way, it's from these writings that we have some information on probably how somebody like Paul died. We say Paul probably died by beheading, or we get that from the Acts of Paul. We talk about Peter probably being crucified upside down, or we get that from the Acts of Peter. So they are from these kinds of literature. However, several church fathers objected to the content of this apocryphal text, partly because of their relatively recent composition compared to the books that eventually became the New Testament, and some of them were kind of tinted with Gnosticism. So yes,
Different from the gospel.
yes, these are not the Acts of. For example, we don't have the Acts of
The
Peter.
gospel of Thomas.
The Gospel of Thomas, those are Gnostic writings. These are martyrological literature. So these are different from the other Gospels or the lost Gospels or whatever scholars call them. Yeah.
If you,
Yeah.
sorry. If you remember, last week I brought the Gospel of Thomas. There are two copies, there are two versions of it, and these are the books that influenced Islam and Muhammad heavily. If you remember last week.
And those come from what we call the Gnostic writings. All of them have been discovered in Egypt in 1945 in what is known as the Nag Hammadi. We call them Nag Hammadi treatises. You still have some books that call them Nag Hammadi scriptures. I don't call them scriptures. Anyway, you have the other lists there, but the most significant one is the Martyrdom of Polycarp, which is really, really hardy. And I'm not going to run through the synopsis here, but it kind of tells us the story of his martyrdom. Polycarp of Smyrna was one of the apostolic fathers. So you have the story about his martyrdom there, the report about his martyrdom. I'm going to just highlight one thing. When you get to the end of the martyrdom of Polycarp, when you are reading it, you remember the story goes something like this, that they tried to burn him at stake, he couldn't be burned at stake. And when finally he began to bleed, his blood came out and kind of quenched the fire. So they had to try another way of killing him, and they thrust a spear on his side, like the way they did with Jesus, and then he finally gets killed. And then he's burned, but as they finish burning him, some of the bones remain. They form, as it's put here, they're like precious kinds of bones. They are very precious. And the Christians who are there take them and they bury them in a special place. And it kind of ends by telling us that Christians annually go to that place to commemorate the martyrdom of Polycarp of Smyrna, and they celebrate his birthday. For early Christians, the birthday that was celebrated for you after you are dead was the day when you died, because that's the day when you are born into the heavens. So that was pretty fascinating. And that practice goes all the way back to the martyrdom of Polycarp. In the medieval times, it becomes something different. It becomes what we call the cult of the saints, whereby Christians and people generally almost worship the dead. And today, it has turned into Halloween. So you can see how it kind of evolved into all of that. That's on a side note. It can be traced to the martyrdom of Polycarp. I have to skip some of this information here, but the point is that they were persecuted and the church continued to grow. A lot of the martyrs is the seed of the church, according to Tertullian. Let's get to some of the heresies and schisms in the 7th century. We kind of move and then hand these ones. There were some schisms, there were some heresies. I understand that you have talked a lot about Gnosticism, so I'll kind of go through that very, very briefly. But the main ones were, of course, Marcionism. We say that it's very interesting to read books that have come out recently and attempted to interpret that. There's a book by Judith Liu that came out in 2015, and she argues that the picture that we are given of Marcion as a heretic is mistaken. But it's very interesting. I was sometimes Googling on the internet. My book has an Oxford version, and they have a different cover from the one that is done by Pickwick in Oregon. And they were talking about how Marcion was not a heretic, and the picture they put there was of the cover of my book. And they never said anything about the cover of my book. I was like, no, that's not what I'm saying in my book. I'm saying it was a heretic. But I don't know how they did that. Anyway, so his story is here. I'm going to make a summary statement here. I would say that Marcion was attempting something that we always keep attempting, and it's something that has produced theological streams like covenantal theology and dispensationalism. And the question is this, okay, how do you relate the two covenants or the two testaments? How does the New Testament relate to the Old Testament? And Marcion kind of came up with a very simple solution. You just chop the Old Testament out of scriptures and remain in the New Testament, and actually go ahead and do scissors and paste, and then chop down some significant portions of the New Testament. I think when he was done, he was kind of left with the letters of Paul and a few other items here and there. The church said, we are not going to go that direction. And that, of course, began now the process of recognizing the canon of the books of the New Testament. So that's kind of a summary statement of a Marcionism, unless there's a question, and then I'll move to Gnosticism.
We also know that Marcion was influenced by Gnosticism. He was. That's one of the reasons that because in Gnosticism you believe that the God of Old Testament is bad, and the God of New Testament is a different God. So he got rid of the Old Testament and the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and many others.
Yes, right here, Marcionism shared many beliefs in Gnosticism, especially the distinction between the demiurge or the Pathos, who is what Gnostics understood to be God, who is the God of the Old Testament, according to them, the bad God of the Old Testament, who demands sacrifices and all kinds of blood, but that's not the God of the New Testament, according to Marcion. So that's kind of how he solved the problem. Yes?
I'm sorry, but wasn't there also an issue of disputing the false, this doctrine, by making the church as the arbitrator of everything? And so that eventually led to the prominence of the Roman Catholic Church.
That will come. Let me put it. That will come a little bit later, but I don't want to go to that direction because even during this time, Christians were able to detect heresy from the truth. And what you are proposing was proposed in 1931 by Paul de Bauer, and that was his big thesis that there were places whereby heresy kind of preceded the orthodoxy, and orthodoxy kind of came and dominated. But that seems to be what is happening here. Christians are very definitely, when it comes to what you have to know and to believe in order to be a Christian, going again back to the letters of Paul. So, yeah. Yes.
Martialism is, I can think of today in our society, so already have something like emerging church.
Yes.
There's a big group of people who call it Christian left. They call themselves Christian left.
Yeah.
They have pretty much very similar teaching today as Martialism. In fact, they state that because all this Old Testament stuff is not relevant to our current culture,
Yeah.
so let's take it away. That is not part of it.
In fact, and I remember my mentor, Dr. Bingham, standing in class and asking us, and this is nothing against Gideons International. I know they do a great job. But when you come across a Gideons in your hotel, it's going to be the New Testament and Proverbs and Psalms. What happened to the other piece of Old Testament? Have you ever wondered about it? Just pick it in Gideons, the little ones. We're going to have that. So sometimes we become marginalized without even and not see that we are marginalized. That kind of, again, skip the definitions of Gnosticism. Let me just put across to you that even though we have been thinking about it as a monolithic movement, it was not a monolithic movement. There were many different streams within Gnosticism. And let's see. So those are the discoveries. Please, I want to send this to you. Don't worry about it, and you'll be able to. I know I'm going a little bit faster here, but you will get it tonight. So don't worry about that. Here I talk about how the documents that we call the Nag-Hammadi treatises, which kind of give us a lot of information about Gnosticism, because all of them that were found there, some additional pieces of literature, were actually written by the Gnostics themselves. And the most interesting thing is that for the longest time that we can think of as Christians, we have been accused of putting beliefs into Gnostics and then responding to those beliefs. Because for the most part, the only information that we had about Gnosticism came from people who were arguing against the Gnostics. We call them the heresiologists, and those would be the church fathers. And the accusation has been, well, you guys created that thing and then offered a response to that thing that you created. Guess what? When these documents were discovered, they confirmed that the church fathers were actually correct in their identification of what Gnosticism is, and also the identification of the teachings of the Gnostics. So they were responding they were very correct in their identification and also response of that. So we have those documents, continue to interact with them. They were written by the Gnostics themselves. Debates still continue on how to interpret this movement. Was it a Christian heresy? For the most part, church fathers seem to see it like that. It was also essentially a non-Christian movement emerging from Persian syncretism, so there's also that kind of interpretation. It comes from what we call the religio Gethicke, or the history of religion school, the German name for that, the history of religion school. Now that's an interesting discipline that attempts to interpret religions. And I make a general statement here. We cannot go into details, but according to this understanding, which is based on Hegelianism, and I'm not going to go to those details, but according to this understanding, well, religion has undergone an evolution, gone through an evolutionary process. And so it started as animism, which is just belief in all kinds of spirits, and then it evolved into polytheism, belief in many gods, which evolved into monotheism, belief in one God like the Jews, which now evolved into Trinitarianism. That is the argument of the history of religion school. We don't adhere to that. We know that God revealed himself to us. But there is that attempt to interpret the Gnosticism from those kind of sources to adhere to that. And then there's an argument that it has got Jewish origins, etc., etc. But I just note here that in my understanding, Gnosticism seems to have traces of all of these sources, including Persian origins, including Greek philosophy, including Judaism, including aspects of Christianity. So it seems to have amalgamated them and then kind of taken this from here, this belief from here, that belief from there, and then come up with a system. And I would say systems because there were different threads within Gnosticism, and that has been confirmed. Okay, here's the point. Whatever debates are there, it's clear that the fathers never affirmed Gnosticism as Christianity. That's very clear. You read all the fathers, and they never affirmed it as Christianity. These were the common themes. I'm going to run through them one more time here. There was the belief in an original element which produced the other principles. It looks like creation was by accident. So somebody messed up something. It does not matter which thread of Gnosticism you read, but creation, which is matter, comes out as an accident, and that is why it is evil. In fact, in my attempt to understand their view of death, especially the group known as Valentinian Gnosticism, which I think was the most dangerous because it was the one that is closest to Christianity. I mean, it almost says the things that we say, but it says them wrongly. They thought death was just so good because it helped somebody escape from this prison known as the body. So death was actually relief. Death was to be longed for because it helped you escape from this. So there are those common threads that you find in all aspects of Gnosticism. And I ran through a number of their leaders here, not all of them. Simon Magus is actually said to be the father of all heresies. Remember, he's mentioned in the book of Acts, chapter 8, the magician. Everything is traced to him. He's the one who kind of started all these kinds of heresies, Simon Magus. Then there were others like Sterentas. We have already mentioned Serentianism is traced to him, and Menadam, and a few others. So you have the information there. Carpocrates, one of the Gnostic teachers. There's Basilides, one of their teachers. We have the information there. You'll be able to see it as we said in the PowerPoint. There's Valentinus. Now, Valentinus is very, very key because he founded the movement known as Valentinianism, an aspect of Gnosticism, which, in my opinion, was the most dangerous. It still continues to show up in various places. So very little is known about him. In fact, some of the key books in Valentinian Gnosticism are thought to have originated from him, including what we know as the Apocryphon of John and also the Gospel of Truth. They are thought to have originated from him. So you have their teachers there, got more information there. As far as the essential features are concerned, there was the teaching that there was a saving gnosis or saving knowledge that came from a transcendent realm, which is manifested by a revealer. An attempt to translate that. Their main point was that Jesus Christ came here on earth to reveal to us the God that we do not know, the God who is known as Mythos or deep that we cannot know about. And Jesus came here as a revealer. And as soon as you get the revelation, which is a special knowledge known as gnosis, then you can be able to ascend back to God or to the so-called pleroma, the fullness. You can be able to ascend that. So he did not come to save, he came to reveal God, but that does not equal salvation. He did not come down the cross for our sins, he came to reveal God. So that was a major teaching. Number two, of course, there's the dualism. And then there are a few other teachings here and there. Let me tell you this, we can never exhaust Gnosticism. My point is that it still continues to be a threat to many, many Christians today. And we have so many scholars today who continue to treat aspects of Gnosticism as though they were really aspects of Christianity. I have a journal article that is being considered right now in a Journal of Evangelical Theological Society, JETS, to be published on the meaning of the work of Christ in Valentinian Gnosticism. And my conclusion right there is that Valentinianism is not Christianity. I mean, even the language, and they use the language that's really, really close to what we find in the Bible. They call themselves interpreters of Paul. They are not. They are misinterpreters of Paul. But we still have so many scholars here and there who think that we are correct. Any question or comment? Gonna have to skip a whole lot of that. The summary is there of the doctrinal errors. I'm gonna have to skip that again. Go to modernism briefly here. Any question or comment? You will have this. Any question or comment? Now, modernism is kind of an interesting movement to deal with. You may remember the church father who gave us the name Trinitas to refer to the Trinity. His name is Tertullian. He died a modernist. I remember one day taking a class at Dallas Theological Seminary and asking my professor, Dr. John Hanna, why did Tertullian become a modernist? Such a great Orthodox church father. And his answer was, oh, I don't know what that means. So that was his answer. I still remember that, oh, and then he continued talking. So don't ask me that. I want to say, oh. Anyway, according to Wright, modernism was a prophetic movement that broke out in Phrygia in the Roman Asia Minor. Who truly classified it as an early charismatic movement. I mean, when you look at the kind of the things that they taught, those Montanus himself, whose early followers were these two women, Priscilla and Maximilla, and they called themselves the new prophetic movement. We are told that he kind of spoke in tongues, and when he started to speak, he claimed to be the Holy Spirit.
Was there much of prophetic stuff going on, charismatic stuff going on with other groups, or was this one of the key ones that we started to do way back up?
This seems to be the earliest evidence where we see this kind of beginning to show up. So after the book of Acts, this is when we begin to see it one more time. When we teach this, we emphasize the fact that the church rejected it. And I think for the other heretical teachings, especially when Montanus began to claim himself to be the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit. So they thought that was it. Yeah. Yeah, so we don't have any, there may be a few things here and there, but not really a major movement that focuses on these aspects. Okay? Oh, so I'm gonna again skip a whole lot of this quotation here, but just note that they seem to emphasize what we call asceticism. Now, that will become a major aspect of Christianity, especially in the medieval ages. And asceticism, if you want to just define it with a few words, the torture of the body for the betterment of the soul. You think doing things to the body will help to better the soul. Things like denial of some things. For Martin Luther, if you remember, he was just sleeping on a bed without a mattress or things like those. It kind of begins with this movement, Christian asceticism here. They practiced stern asceticism, which was a problem to marriages and things like that. And they really had a very strict diet. We think we are dietitians today. They only had a dry diet. The name for that is raw fungi. So it's very interesting. I'm going to make a summary statement here. For the most part, their theological problem was to not to understand who God the Holy Spirit is. And for that reason, the church rejected them. It may be understood as a protest movement against the church, because what seemed to have been happening is that they thought that the church was becoming more secularized. And for that reason, they formed part of the early resistance. So I read modernism with a kind of a grain of salt. I don't entirely reject it. I see what they were trying to do, but as soon as they misunderstood the Holy Spirit and the thought that a person was the Holy Spirit, that becomes problematic. Encratism, we have already mentioned encratism. It's from Greek enkrateia, which means to have one's power or self-control. I would say that again, this practice kind of emphasized Christian asceticism. You're going to see these begin to take place a lot. As you move to the medieval ages, you are going to see these take place a lot, where Christians are denying themselves all kinds of things, thinking that by so doing, they become more godlike, they become more godly. So they were excessive ascetic practices such as rejecting wine, meat, etc., and even marriage, but how continue to be there. They saw human production as bad and a hindrance to higher life. Now that's very, very interesting. So this anti-heretical literature kind of associates the heretical encratism, especially with the apologist tradition. So we have already gone through that, and we're going to skip all of that. So you see these kinds of movements all have aspects in them that may be considered problematic. But then their attempts just to have a holy life and to be godlike is to be appreciated, but then they took it too far, and that becomes a problem. Question or comment as we move to the last slides here, and as we get into the beginnings and development of early Christian doctrine, as we move now to these final figures of consideration here. Okay, so let me go through these final figures of consideration here. We have talked about them, but one more time, I'll talk about Irenaeus of Lyon, been identified as a Christian apologist, stroke polemicist, and was a developer of doctrine. And by a developer of doctrine, we are talking about now people who come up and now begin to synthesize the teachings that we find in the Bible. And for the most part, they do that as they respond to questions that are being raised, both inside the church and also outside the church. Irenaeus of Lyons was the famous bishop of Lyons. He's now in modern-day France. There's a summary of his life by this Australian scholar. His name is Osborne. It's very interesting because as you read his life, what happened was that he kind of left Lyons for some time, just to take a letter to Rome to kind of protest the martyrdom that was taking place in Vienna and Lyons. And by the time he came back, most of the leadership of the church had already been killed, including his bishop, Prometheus, and Pothinus, and then he took over that position. I mean, these people were courageous. Just imagine taking up a pastoral position because the guy before you was just murdered. And then you go ahead and take up the pastoral position. You're not looking for more money or anything like that. So you have to understand these people in the environment within which they live. So took up the position. Is most significant writing, which we have talked about here and there, is what we call Antibates Hairesis. This is a multi-volume writing. It's a 5-volume writing, which touches on many subjects. In fact, he is the first one to indicate to us that within Gnosticism there were movements, because he talks about Valentinianism, especially in book 3. So you see all of that in his writings. They are part of what we call anti-Nicene Fathers. The books that known as Nicene Fathers, his writings can in that book set. Let's keep there. He also wrote what is known as a demonstration or proof of apostolic preaching, just a homiletical book. His major idea, apart from, of course, his response to the heretics, was what is known as the recapitulation theory. It continues to be discussed here. It pertains today, that is, it pertains to the question of the work of Christ. What did Christ do? And it really, in a summary form, he argues that Jesus Christ is the new Adam. Both man and God is now the new head of humanity. And he demonstrates that what Adam lost, step by step, Christ recovered. So he recapitulated, went through the life as it was supposed to be, and he brought back that which Adam lost with his fall. And that becomes what we call the recapitulation theory. It has been discussed and advanced and even taken to extreme positions. Like people think that he was arguing for universalism, that when Christ is finally done with his work and he puts all under Christ, then all will be under Christ and everybody will eventually be redeemed. Origen is going to take it a little bit further and say even the devil himself is going to be redeemed. Irenaeus did not take it that far. He just made a comparison and a contrast with Adam and Christ, the new Adam. So that is what in the following slides must keep those. Come to Tertullian of Carthage, 160 to 220 AD. In my understanding, he is the last of the apologists. By the time you get to 220 AD, you are now crossing over. You remember our church many hours ago. You are now crossing over from the apologists to the theologians. You're getting out of Origen and the theologians. We have talked about him so much, an African church father. It was originally a Greek writing father, then he finally wrote in Latin. He joined Montanism in 207. It's got a number of pithy sayings. You read him and just laugh it. The one who said that there's nothing that Athens has got to do with Jerusalem. What has got the city of Athens to do with Jerusalem, the academy, and the Bible? We get our wisdom from the Porch of Solomon. I'm kind of paraphrasing that, but he goes ahead and gets his wisdom from Athens. And this is right on the Trinity. So it's very interesting thing. He's got all these kinds of funny sayings, like the one, of course, who says the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. The more we are cut down by you, the more the number we grow. The blood of Christians is seed. That's the full quote there. It is credible because it's unlikely talking about Christianity and why it's credible. And number three, what has Athens to do with Jerusalem? What concord is there between the academy and the church? So very, very interesting. There are a few other things that I was given. Go to Clement of Alexandria, 162-15. Now, when you move to Alexandria, you begin to see a hermeneutical method known as allegorism. So that begins to emerge if you move to Alexandria here. I talk about the church in Alexandria, possibly when it was started. It was really influenced by Gnosticism, and there was a school in Alexandria which was very, very allegorical in its interpretation of scripture. I talk about his life there and his contributions. He went into great details to show what kind of relationship should be there between Greek philosophy and Christianity. Yes, sir.
You explain allegorical.
Yes, I was just about to get to that, but I'll explain it briefly here. Allegorical interpretation is just looking at a deeper meaning when you read a portion of scripture, looking at not the literal meaning that you find there, but attempting to look at a deeper meaning. It kind of starts as what may look like a good endeavor, whereby they are trying to explain quote-unquote problematic portions of the Bible, but eventually it becomes very problematic as a method. So that's what we're talking about here. Now, to skip a whole lot of information here, and then it talks about the uses of philosophy by Christians. You can see them laid out there. And then we move to Origen. Cruising here, we are getting to Cyprian. That will be the end of the discussion. Some people think that he was the most prolific Christian writer before Augustine. And again, this is Origen, so it's going to cut both ways. It's going to go positive and negative and everything in between. There is information about his life there, where he studied and all of that. As far as his achievements are concerned, he gave us what is known as the Exarchia, which was a 6 parallel columns comparing line by line the Hebrew Old Testament, the Greek transliteration, the Greek translation of Highland, Symmachus, the Septuagint, and the Old Theodotion. So he laid these manuscripts together and compared them side by side. That was a yeoman's work at that point in history. He did that. He came up with a tripartite hermeneutical approach. Now that's what you're talking about here. He said that when you read a piece of scripture, you have got to go beyond bodily sense, which is the literal interpretation. Now, just to be clear, we stand for a literal interpretation, and we don't necessarily mean what he meant by that here, but he said you've got to go beyond the literal, you've got to go to the psychic, which is the bad word here, but it means the soul or the spiritual interpretation, and then you have, which now refers to the moral of the story, and then you go to the pneumatic. The psychic will be the soul, the pneumatic will be the spiritual interpretation. So you have got to go through all those levels until you get to that level. That is allegorical. In fact, in the medieval times, that one is going to expand into all levels of studying the Word of God. It becomes these layers and layers of interpretations that people like Martin Luther, when he went to the Reformation and others, are going to attempt to break down. They don't go far enough, but they are going to attempt to break down. So that is what you have there. So again, later the three sense is expanded into four sense, the meaning of scripture, historical, moral, allegorical, etc., etc. These are things that we covered in the previous class when we talked about interpretation. So I'll kind of go through those very briefly. So one wonders, back to your question, why was this method accepted, the allegorical method? Why was it accepted? Dr. Hanna makes a comment here that allegory recommended itself to Christian apologists when challenged by difficult passages of scripture. So originally they were attempting to explain difficult passages of scripture. It also afforded a way of exploiting the rich descriptive details of the biblical record by reading them as signifying hidden moral or spiritual meanings. It's another way of saying what Hannah is saying here. It was a quick getaway from the labor of digging difficult passages. You easily let them be what you wanted from me, and then get away from that. The opposing school, of course, Origen and his students founded what is known as the Alexandrian school of interpretation, focusing on allegorism. The opposing school was the Antiochian school of interpretation over there in Antioch, which was in contrast to the Alexandrian school of interpretation. So it rejected their pedant and their really rejection of literalism. The Antiochian school emphasized the literal interpretation of scripture. Their key guy there was Theodore of Messuatia. If you find his works, just read his works. He's a great literalist when it comes to understanding the Word of God. But he criticized the guys over there in Alexandria, making the comment that there are people who take great pains to twist the senses of the divine scriptures and make everything written therein serve their own ends. They dream up of some silly fables in their own heads and give their folly the name of allegory. They misuse the apostle's term, that would be Paul, where he said that allegory, as a blank authorization to abolish all meanings of scripture. So they rejected that kind of an approach. You can continue with this quotation here, but when all is said and done, by the time you get over with the theologians, because the theologians are going to continue their work, as Dr. P is going to demonstrate next week, they are going to continue their work all the way to the beginning of the medieval period. Allegorism is going to become the dominant method of interpretation. It is going to continue all the way to the time of the Reformation. It is not going to be entirely dismantled during the time of the Reformation, because Martin Luther is going to retain some of that as he talked about his Christological interpretation. And that's why, as Christians, as Orthodox believers, we keep saying that we are always reforming, because it never gets done. So we keep on check on that. Any question or comment? Kind of going through the last ones here. Yes.
Maybe it's subtle, maybe it's not. The difference between allegory and symbolism. Certainly symbolism, I think, I'm a layman, but I would think symbolism certainly exists.
Symbolism does exist in scripture, and there's justification for that. However, there's going to be a correspondence between the symbol and that which is being signified. So if that correspondence is not there, then symbolism will not be valid. However, allegorism now goes beyond all of that, and it creates meanings out of I mean, you can see the examples and they're just shortly examples. So yeah, that is the difference. And as we go through hermeneutics, we kind of identify all kinds of genres, and as symbolism and typology and all those other helpful genres, we can be able to identify those. But allegories, when used properly, going to see it used in the medieval age, is going to go far and beyond, create meanings, as you're going to say. Yeah. Any other question or comment?
So I'm sorry, but I noticed you quoted from people in the, so you quoted the 2nd century, and then you went to the 4th century.
Yes.
And there was this gap in between.
Yes.
Between what I would call people who were trying to interpret scripture, and
right.
people who were trying to symbolize scripture.
Yeah.
What happened in between in that 200 years?
Well, what has happened here, and I will cover that 200 years. but what has happened here is that the focus has shifted. So we have seen the shift, the focus shift from the earlier fathers, who will be the apostolic fathers, who are kind of dealing, they're coming after the apostles, they're dealing with issues right there, what to do in the Old Testament and all of that. Then we went to the apologists, who will be for the most part in the 2nd century, and their focus is going to be the faith and the biblical instruct doctrine. As we move to the theologians, what has happened is that they have now begun to argue theological work of interpretation and formulating doctrine. So that is what has happened. We have meant the truth, believe me or not. Yeah.
Do you think it had anything to do with the growth of the church as an actual power? Because certainly Clementine,
the point,
acknowledge that.
Just to respond to your point, at this point, the church does not have any quote unquote power, so to speak. It's going to begin to receive that power when Constantine signs his Edict of Milan in 313 AD, as we're going to see from next week. And that is why he grants the church. The church now from that point moves from what we call religio illicita, meaning illegal religion, to religio licita, meaning legal religion, and more so the official religion of Rome. So at this point, we cannot talk a lot about the church power. It doesn't have any quote-unquote power per se. It's going to get that power. Yeah. Any other question or comments? You can read about Hippolytus. He wrote what is known as the refutation of 4 heresies, again, refuting the heresies, but it brings us all the way to 236 AD. So you can read about him. And finally, you will get to Cyprian of Carthage, and he dies in around 258 AD. So we are kind of now crossing the 300s in from there next week. Cyprian, we mentioned him earlier. He was, sometimes I think of him as the first pope. Now, he will never accept that kind of a title, and neither will churches to grant him that kind of a title. But with him, we begin to see really the initial steps being taken towards having a mono-episcopate, one single leader of the whole church. He's going to be the one who says that if you are outside of the church, then you can be saved. The one who is going to conceive of the church as the womb. Now, the Roman Catholic Church still says things of the church as the womb, and if you are outside the womb, then you cannot be saved. So his work is going to be a lot more on ecclesiology, the meaning of the church. So there's a lot as far as his understanding of the church is concerned. Debates here pertain to the question of whether the church is pure, or the church is mixed. Is it only made up of pure people, just the saints, or is the church mixed? And there are going to be all kinds of debates and controversies. You go through the Novatian controversy, the Donatist controversy, which will become very significant as you look at Augustine, later the Donatist controversy, and the debate is on whether the church is pure or not. And as it used to move in the medieval ages, it's going to be that understanding that the church is pure, and then it's going to reach a point whereby if you disagree with it, then you can be physically punished, things like those. So you begin to see that trajectory. It can easily be traced back Cyprian of Carthage. Question or comment? Done here. So we disturbed in 258 AD, then we close that chapter of Judges. Yes?
Are there any groups that have taken now, went away from the main universal church? Are there any groups that
At this point,
yes.
the debates are going to be between the Donatists who are going to be considered separatists, because they are going to go out of the church, and they are going to go out of it on the basis of the question of the purity of the church. Their argument is going to be that if under persecution you rejected Christ and gave out scriptures to be burnt, then you are a traitor, you are a traitor, and you cannot be able to be admitted back to the church. Augustine is going to take a slightly different direction, which is that they can be forgiven and restituted. But if you are thinking about a breakout group, there will be the Donatists, there will be really earlier the Novatians, and then later the Donatists, and then later you have the Circumcisions who wanted to reform the church violently, including just running the monasteries and killing nuns and stuff like that. So then giving the Eucharist bread to dogs. Those would be the violent reformers. So we know that. Any final thoughts? Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, dear brother. Thank you, doctor. Greatly appreciate your great lecture. I have 2 more minutes. Wanted to mention a few things. As Dr. Mute's lecture is fresh in our mind, regarding the allegorical interpretation, just think of, Origen came with this idea, as we have body, soul, and spirit. He says that you have the literal interpretation correspond to the body, then you have moral interpretation, then you have to get to the spiritual interpretation. The problem is that you end up with a form of mysticism, and you will end up creating some interpretation which is not there. Yes, symbolism exists in the scripture, but the symbols in the scripture always point to a literal meaning. Even though we have symbolism, but they refer to something literal. But yes, in the book of Psalms talks about, the trees will clap their hand at the coming of the Christ. Yeah, we know this is symbolism, but it's pointing to something literal, an event which is literal. There was a question about why this was gaining influence in the church. I believe still there's an influence of Gnosticism, because if you continue allegory system, you will come very close to Gnosticism, because Gnosticism says that there's some secret meaning that is not revealed to everybody, and you have to work hard to get it. Origin of Gnosticism, I believe it comes from Genesis chapter 3, when it comes from Satan. When Satan told to Eve, if you eat from this fruit, you will know good and evil. And that's why I believe this heresy of Gnosticism is so fluid and it's so powerful. It takes many shapes and forms: Christian form, Jewish form, pagan form, Greek form, Persian form, all kinds of stuff. Oh yeah. Another thing, just remember last week I mentioned, try to always find cause and effect if you want church history to become, or any history to become interesting. Try to connect the dots. Of course, make sure that you're connecting properly. As Dr. Mute was saying, the 3 main heresies in the 2nd century, Marcionism, Gnosticism, and Montanism. You see, Marcion was influenced by Gnosticism. That's why he just chopped up the Old Testament and anything that was Jewish in the scripture. Gnosticism had direct influence on Marcion and an indirect influence on Montanus in this faith. The question that the doctor asked, why did somebody like Tertullian, I asked that question last week, why did somebody like Tertullian join this group? Somebody with such a knowledge that he was influential in forming in the pre-formulation of the doctrine of Trinity. Well, if you read Tertullian's writing, he was upset, and not only him, Montanus and their followers, about the established church. They were saying the established church has become worldly. And there was this tendency that, by incorporating some of the elements of Gnosticism, we can gain respectability in the unbelieving society. Then there came this reaction from Montanus, Tertullian, the church has become worldly. No, we have to go back to the times of the apostles. And think of it, yes, again, please don't take me wrong. I'm not making it complete equivalence between Montanus and the modern day charismatic movement, but they have very many similarities. And if you study the modern day charismatic movement, started in 1906 as a Street Revival, it came out of holiness movement. And the idea, again, the argument was that the church is becoming worldly. It was a response to the liberal Christianity of late 19th and early 20th century. So you see, if you find the connections, then these events make a lot more sense. Again, thank you very much, Doctor. Greatly appreciate it. You're dismissed.
Thank you so much.
I know that. Yeah, I will.
See you Thursday night?
Yeah, I'll see you.
And he's staying consistent.
We didn't even need to, a couple of things and stuff were relevant, especially with just so this is the boss. Yeah. That's the answer. Exhausted? I say privilege.
Hey, got it. That's good. That's good. Gotta keep my ears though. Like, it's hard to hear. Yeah. Yeah, he did.
Because I go, let me finish.